We're going to be going over 8.1 through 8.3 review notes for our quiz that's going to be on Monday. The first thing I want you to write down is this, number 1. Write the ratio as a fraction in simplest form. My example here says 20 to 15. How do I put that as a fraction?
20 over 15.
20 over 15. Now, it says to put it in simplest form. So what would simplest form be? Divide by 5 on top and bottom, and what do you get? 4 thirds. This is an improper fraction, but that's okay, all right? This is a ratio. It could be something about maybe a team that won. They won 4 games, they lost 3, okay? So it is okay that it is an improper fraction. The answer is 4 to 3. Just double check and make sure it's in fraction form. On your test, you might also see something like this. Let's say that I asked you to put 6 to 3. How do I do that as a fraction? 6 over 3. If I was to reduce that, what would I get? Okay, you would get 2, but my instructions say to write it as a fraction. Is 2 a fraction? No, so you would need it to be what? 2 over 1, and that would be your answer. Okay, so just make sure you double check, reread those instructions. When it asks it to be a fraction, make sure it's a fraction. It asks it to be in simplest form, make sure it's reduced as much as it can be. Number 2 says, find the unit rate. This right here says, maybe they made $15 in 6 days. The whole thing about unit rate is you have to do what? The denominator has to become 1. Sherelle, how do I make this denominator become a 1? Divide by the denominator of 6 on top and on bottom. Remember, whenever you get the answer, you do have to have the units there. So what is my unit rate? $2.50 per day. The question was asked, do we have to put the 0? Yes, there is actually no such thing as $2.5. Every time that you have money, you have to have 2 numbers after the decimal point. So yes, if you put $2.5, it would be incorrect. It must be $2.50. Number 3, when finding the unit rate, which part of the fraction has to be a 1? What's the answer, guys? Which part of the fraction has to be a 1? The denominator. Now, on your test, I might not necessarily ask it just like this, but you're going to have to know the information that's asked in this question. I might say something like this. When finding the unit rate, the denominator has to be the number what? 1. So you'd have to identify it has to be the number 1. Or I might say, anytime I have a denominator that has a denominator of 1, I am finding the what? I am finding the unit rate, okay? So you're going to want to know all the information in there. Basically, unit rate, you have to have a denominator of 1. Number 4, tell whether the slope is positive, negative, or 0. Remember, whenever you're looking at a graph, you are reading it from left to right. So I'm starting here and going in this direction. Which direction is that?
Negative.
I'm going downward, so that is a negative direction. So my slope here would be negative. Number 5 says find the average speed, and we have to use the formula. What is the formula that we know for finding the average speed? A equals D over T. What does the A equals D over T stand for? Average speed equals distance over time. Looking at my original problem right here, what is the distance that I gave to you?
20 yards.
20 yards. Thank you for telling me yards. You always want to have the units attached. 20 yards. And what is my time?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Now, when you are finding the average speed, you are not allowed to have anything in the denominator except for a 1. So it's basically like once you've put this into a fraction, now you've got to find the unit rate. 20 yards in 5 minutes. I want you to find out how many yards that would be in 1 minute. What do I need to divide by to get my denominator of 1?
5.
Divide by 5 on top and 5 on bottom, and when you do that, what do you get?
24 yards equals 5 per minute.
4 yards per minute. So within 1 minute of time, they're going to travel 4 yards. So it's asking you, what is the formula for slope? What is it, guys? I don't want you just to say rise over run.
Slope equals rise over run.
Slope equals rise over run. That is the whole formula. Because if you don't tell me that the slope equals, you might be thinking the average speed equals or something else. So I want the entire formula there. Slope equals rise over run. Number 7 says draw the line that has the given slope and passes through the given point. So it tells you here that the slope is 1 over 2 and it passes through -1 and -2. Does anybody remember what step I have to do first before doing anything else?
Ms. Vorpahl?
All right, Tati, what's the first thing I got to do? Okay, I got to find -1 and -2. I go to the left -1 and down -2. Now, here's the one thing I really want to emphasize because I saw in the homework last night, a lot of people had a hard time with this. This is what they saw. Oh, slope is 1 over 2, so I'm going to go ahead and go over 1 and up 2, and they think that this is the point. I want to emphasize to you, slope is not a point on your graph. Slope is how steep your line is going to be. So whether it's going to look like this, or whether the line's going to look like this, or maybe the line's going to look like this. That's what the slope is. The slope is showing you how steep your line is going to be. It will not ever be a point on your graph. So instead, slope. What's the formula for slope? Rise over run. So that means every time I will be rising 1 and running 2. So you're going to start from your dot. Rise 1 and run 2. Then you plot the dot. You'll rise 1 and run 2. Then you'll plot that dot. And remember, every single time you're going to erase that work right there so that you have a nice clean graph, and then you'll connect the dots. What I like to do then is go back through my instructions just to double check and make sure I've done what it asked me. The instructions said draw a line, which I did, that has a given slope, which we used that slope, and it passes through the given point, and we used that point. So now I know I am finished with that problem, and I've done exactly what I need to do. On your quiz, you'll see there will be a lot of different things when we're using slope and different stuff like that. You've just got to really reread the directions to make sure you're doing the correct thing each time. If you notice, if you were to have thought this right here was a point on your graph, over 1, up 2, that has absolutely nothing to do with the slope and the line that you were supposed to have. So just be careful. Remember, slope is not a point that's on your graph. Number 8, draw the graph of the line that passes through the points and then find the slope. If you notice on the problem we just did for number 7, I gave you the slope. This one has not given us the slope. So our goal after drawing the line is to find the slope. When I'm doing this right here, the first thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and plot those points. So I'm going to go to a -2 and then down to 1. Then I'm going to go over 2 and up 3. You've got to connect the line or the dots. So now as I go back and I reread my instructions, I have drawn the graph that it asked me to, but the one thing I haven't done is find the slope. So now I've got to find my slope. Once again, what's the slope formula? Rise over run. Make sure you do rise over run, not run over rise. If you try to do run over rise, it will give you the wrong answer. Rise over run. So right now, as I'm looking at this graph, I can see from left to right, I'm starting here and I'm going in an upward direction. Is that going to be positive, negative, or 0 for my slope? It's going to be a positive slope. So now I know I've got to count my rise. 1, 2, 3, 4. I went up 4, so that's a positive direction, and then over 1, 2, 3, 4. My rise over run is 4 over 4. Can that be reduced at all? What could it be reduced to? 1, okay? You could put it as a 1 over 1, but I still would want you to show me 1 over 1 equals 1. So the rise over run is 1, all right? So you could see I could go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, and that works, okay? So that's another way to double check it, but the rise over run was 1 over 1, so my slope is 1. Okay, for this one, finding the slope of the line, once again, what is my slope formula? Rise over run. So as I'm doing this, I am rising, how many? Count with me.
1, 2, 3.
I rose 3, and I'm running how many? Count with me.
1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, I went backwards, so what should that be? -4. So when I pull that out, my slope is -3/4. As you can see, I started here and I went downward. Whenever I do that, what should my answer be? Positive, negative, or 0?
Negative.
Negative. And did I get a negative answer?
Yes.
I did. You can see I've got the negative sign right there. This next one, number 10, says determine which one's the better buy. How do I put the Cheerios into a fraction form?
48 ounces over $10.
Okay, 48 ounces over $10. Now I've got to have a unit rate, so I divide by what? Divide by 10 over $10. Plug it into your calculators and tell me what the unit rate would be for my Cheerios.
4.8 ounces per dollar.
4.8 ounces per dollar. Now I've got to figure out how much the Lucky Charms are per dollar. So how do I do that?
12 ounces over 240.
Okay, and I've got to divide by what?
240.
240 on top and 240 on bottom, because whatever I do to the top, I've got to do to the bottom so that I'm fair. When you plug that into your calculator, don't forget, you must have the units. What would my answer be?
$5.
Not $5.
5 ounces per dollar.
5 ounces per dollar. So you're looking here, and I know this one is 4.8 ounces. This one is 5 ounces per dollar. Which one am I getting more ounces for my dollar?
Lucky Charms.
The Lucky Charms. So the Lucky Charms is the better buy. I've got one last example that I want to do today before you guys go. Write a ratio for the Bears' wins to their games played. So you're going to look at a chart that looks like this, and you can see how many games they played, how many wins and losses they have. So what do I write down first for my ratio?
Wins. The wins.
I write down their wins. What was their wins?
2.
2. They have 2 wins. And how many games played total?
16.
16. You just got to remember you got a total the wins and the losses they had, which was 16. Is this reduced?
No.
No. Divide by 2 on top and bottom, and what do you get?
1/8.
1/8. So they won 1 game to the 8 games that they played. Does it seem like they're having a great season? Not really. It seems like they struggled a little bit. So on Monday, you are going to have your quiz over 8.1 to 8.3. Please make sure that you study and review for that this weekend.